Have you ever noticed a woman hugging you first and wondered, does this mean anything? Most men completely misread this signal, and that's exactly why they miss what she's really trying to tell them. In this video, we're diving deep into female psychology to uncover why that first hug isn't random, what she's truly communicating, and how your response can either deepen attraction or push her away. Stay with me, because understanding this could completely change the way she sees you and the way you see her. By the end, you'll never look at a hug the same way again. A woman initiating physical touch is a psychological break in pattern. For most men, physical touch feels casual, almost automatic. A handshake, a pat on the back, a hug, it all blends together as normal social behavior. But female psychology operates very differently when it comes to initiating physical contact. When a woman hugs you first, she is not simply performing a polite social gesture. She is breaking a deeply ingrained psychological pattern shaped by safety awareness, emotional filtering, and social conditioning. This is why the moment matters far more than most men realize. From an early age, women are taught, both directly and indirectly, to be cautious with physical closeness. Touch is not neutral for them. It carries emotional weight, social implications, and perceived risk. Because of this, women usually allow men or circumstances to initiate physical contact, especially in early or ambiguous stages of connection. When a woman chooses to initiate a hug herself, she is actively overriding a default setting designed to protect her emotional and physical boundaries. That alone makes the action significant. This psychological break-in pattern does not happen impulsively. Even when it appears spontaneous, the decision is usually preceded by internal evaluations. She has already assessed how safe you feel, how comfortable she is around you, and how her body reacts in your presence. If those internal signals do not align, the hug simply does not happen. So when it does, it means something inside her has shifted from caution to allowance. Another critical factor most men miss is that women are far more aware of how touch can be interpreted. She knows that a hug can be misread as interest, attraction, or emotional availability. Initiating one exposes her to assumptions she may not be ready to verbalize. Because women tend to avoid unnecessary emotional risk, they do not take this step lightly. A first hug initiated by her is rarely meaningless. It reflects a level of trust that has already been built quietly, often without the man noticing. This trust does not automatically mean romantic desire, but it does mean access. She has allowed you into her personal space by choice, not by obligation or social pressure. That distinction matters. Social hugs, such as greetings in group settings or cultural norms, follow external scripts. A hug initiated privately, unexpectedly, or without clear social prompting comes from internal motivation. Female psychology places enormous importance on internal motivation because it aligns with genuine emotional states rather than surface-level politeness. Men often underestimate how selective women are with physical initiation because men project their own psychology onto the situation. For a man, a hug can be friendly, casual, or meaningless. For a woman, it is a form of communication. It expresses comfort when words feel excessive, and curiosity when clarity feels premature. When she initiates touch, she is saying something without committing to saying everything. This is also where attraction often begins to quietly grow or decline. The hug is not just about closeness, it is about observation. She is subconsciously watching how you respond. Are you tense or relaxed? Do you overreact emotionally? Do you freeze, pull away, or lean in with desperation? Her nervous system reads your response faster than her conscious mind can explain it. Your reaction feeds back into her perception of your emotional safety and masculine stability. Another overlooked layer is that women often need to feel emotionally aligned before they feel physically expressive. Men tend to associate physical touch as the gateway to emotional connection, but for women, the order is reversed. Emotional comfort precedes physical initiation. So when she hugs you first, it often means emotional groundwork has already been laid. Conversations, shared moments, consistency, and how you made her feel over time have quietly accumulated into that one gesture. This is why treating the hug as random weakens your awareness. Random behavior does not align with how female psychology manages risk and connection. Women rarely cross boundaries without reason, even if that reason is subconscious. The hug is a symptom of an internal decision, not the decision itself. Missing that point causes men to either rush forward emotionally or dismiss the moment entirely, both of which disrupt the natural progression she is testing. Understanding this keynote reframes the hug from an isolated action into a psychological indicator. It signals that she has shifted you from neutral to trusted, from distant to permitted, from observer to participant. What happens after that moment depends less on the hug itself and more on whether you recognize that she has opened a door, and whether you have the emotional intelligence to stand calmly in that space without forcing it wider or slamming it shut. Most men focus on the hug itself, the physical act, the arms around the body, the brief moment of closeness, and then immediately jump to conclusions. Female psychology does not work this way. For women, meaning is rarely contained in a single action. Meaning lives in context. Without understanding the surrounding circumstances, emotional tone, and timing, the hug becomes easy to misinterpret. This is why two identical hugs can communicate completely different things depending on when, where, and why they happen. Context begins with the environment. A hug in a crowded social setting, where hugging is expected or culturally normal, carries far less psychological weight than a hug that happens in a quiet, unprompted moment. When a woman initiates a hug in a setting where she could have easily avoided physical contact, that choice becomes meaningful. Female psychology is highly sensitive to social scripts. When she follows the script, the action is often neutral. When she steps outside it, the action becomes intentional. Timing is another layer that reveals meaning. A hug at the beginning of an interaction can be polite, but a hug that happens after an emotionally engaging conversation reflects something deeper. If she hugs you after sharing something personal, laughing together, or experiencing a moment of mutual understanding, the hug becomes a physical extension of emotional connection. Women often use touch to seal emotional moments rather than create them. The hug is not initiating the bond. It is acknowledging that the bond already exists. Emotional state also plays a critical role. A woman who is stressed, vulnerable, or emotionally open may use a hug as a grounding mechanism. This does not automatically mean romantic attraction, but it does indicate emotional trust. The key distinction lies in whether that vulnerability is shared with many people or selectively with you. Female psychology is pattern-based. She may hug several friends when emotional, but if she consistently chooses you in moments of emotional transition, the context shifts from comfort-seeking to connection-building. Another overlooked contextual cue is what happens immediately before and after the hug. Does she move closer before initiating it, or does it happen abruptly? Does she linger afterward, maintain eye contact, or continue the conversation with warmth? Women communicate continuity through behavior. A hug followed by emotional distance often serves a different purpose than a hug followed by increased engagement. The post-hug behavior frequently reveals more than the hug itself. Men often make the mistake of isolating the hug from the ongoing dynamic. Female psychology operates holistically. She is not thinking in moments. She is responding to a flow of interactions. If the hug fits into a pattern of growing closeness, deeper conversations, and increased availability, it likely carries relational significance. If it exists in isolation, surrounded by emotional inconsistency, its meaning may be limited to the moment. Cultural and personality context cannot be ignored either. Some women are naturally more expressive with touch, but even expressive women have boundaries. They may hug many people, but they do not initiate hugs with everyone in the same way. Differences in pressure, duration, and body orientation still matter. Female psychology adapts expression to the individual, not just the habit. A habitual hugger who suddenly changes how she hugs you is communicating something distinct. Context also includes history. How long have you known each other? How has the relationship evolved? A first hug after weeks of reserved interaction carries different meaning than a first hug on a first meeting. Women track emotional progression more than men realize. They remember how long they have held back, and when they finally initiate touch, It often marks a shift in how they categorize you internally. Ignoring context leads men to misread signals because they treat physical touch as a universal language. Female psychology uses touch as a dialect, not a sentence. It must be interpreted alongside tone, timing, environment, and behavioral patterns. The hug itself is simply the visible part of an invisible emotional process that has already been unfolding. And understanding that process is what separates intuition from confusion. When a woman hugs a man first, the signal itself is often subtle, but the mistake men make in response is usually extreme. Female psychology operates in nuance, yet many men respond in absolutes. They either inflate the meaning of the hug and rush forward emotionally, or they dismiss it entirely as meaningless. Both reactions come from the same root problem: a lack of psychological calibration. Overreaction is the most common error. The moment the hug happens, some men immediately assume romantic intent and allow their behavior to shift. Their tone becomes eager, their attention becomes excessive, and their emotional investment spikes. Female psychology is highly sensitive to changes in emotional energy. When a man suddenly amplifies his interest based on a single moment, it creates pressure. What felt like a safe, exploratory gesture to her now feels like a commitment she did not agree to. This pressure triggers withdrawal, not because the hug was a mistake, but because the response disrupted the emotional balance. Women initiate touch as a way to explore comfort, not to sign emotional contracts. When a man responds by escalating too fast, he removes her ability to move at her own pace. Female psychology values autonomy in emotional progression. Overreaction signals emotional impatience and a lack of self-regulation, which reduces attraction even if interest existed before the hug. On the opposite end of the spectrum, many men ignore the signal completely. They treat the hug as accidental, polite, or irrelevant, continuing the interaction with emotional distance or indifference. While this may appear confident on the surface, it often communicates emotional unavailability. Female psychology interprets this as either a lack of awareness or a lack of interest. In both cases, the result is the same. She does not feel seen. Women rarely initiate touch without intention. When that intention is met with emotional flatness, it disrupts the feedback loop she was testing. The hug was a probe, not a declaration. Ignoring it gives her no data, no emotional response to assess, and no confirmation that her gesture was received. Over time, this leads her to stop initiating altogether, not because attraction faded, but because the interaction no longer feels responsive. Both overreaction and dismissal stem from insecurity expressed in different forms. Overreaction is insecurity seeking reassurance. Ignoring is insecurity hiding behind emotional withdrawal. Female psychology responds poorly to both because both signal a lack of grounded presence. What women seek is not intensity or indifference, but steadiness. Another reason men misread the signal is projection. Men often assume women communicate interest the way men do. For men, physical touch often means desire or intent. For women, it means curiosity, comfort, or emotional testing. When men project their own communication style onto women, they misinterpret exploratory behavior as conclusive evidence. This misunderstanding creates expectations that the woman never agreed to meet. Men also misread the signal because they isolate the hug from the broader dynamic. Female psychology evaluates consistency. A hug is weighed alongside communication patterns, availability, emotional depth, and mutual effort. When men treat the hug as a standalone event, they distort its significance. This distortion leads to reactive behavior instead of responsive behavior. Social conditioning plays a role as well. Men are often taught to look for clear signs and act decisively. Female psychology, however, rarely offers clarity up front. It offers gradients. The hug sits somewhere in the middle of those gradients. It is neither a green light nor a red light, but a shift from neutral to open. Men who fail to recognize this middle space either rush past it or step back into safety, missing the opportunity to deepen connection organically. The men who navigate these moments successfully are not the ones who decode every detail, but the ones who remain emotionally centered. They allow the hug to register without letting it dictate their behavior. They continue the interaction with the same calm confidence, subtly acknowledging the increased closeness without demanding more. Female psychology responds positively to this because it feels safe, respectful, and emotionally intelligent. Misreading the hug is rarely about the hug itself. It is about how a man handles ambiguity. Women often communicate through ambiguity to protect themselves emotionally. Men who panic in ambiguity reveal instability. Men who disappear in ambiguity reveal disengagement. The signal most men miss is not the hug, but the opportunity to demonstrate composure in the space between certainty and uncertainty. One of the most misunderstood aspects of female psychology is the belief that physical touch is a declaration of intent. Men often interpret a woman initiating a hug as a clear statement of attraction or emotional commitment. In reality, women rarely use touch as a confession. Instead, they use it as a subconscious test. The hug is not her answer. It is her question. Women are highly attuned to emotional safety. Before they verbalize interest, they need to feel grounded in how a man responds under subtle pressure. Touch creates that pressure without forcing a conversation. By initiating a hug, she introduces a mild emotional shift and observes how you handle it. This allows her to gather information while maintaining emotional control. Female psychology favors observation over declaration, especially in early or uncertain stages of connection. The test is not about whether you enjoy the hug. It is about whether you remain centered. When she initiates touch, she is temporarily blurring a boundary. What she is watching for is whether you respect that boundary or attempt to push past it. Men who immediately escalate, emotionally or physically, signal a lack of restraint. Men who freeze or withdraw signal discomfort or insecurity. Neither response provides the calm reassurance her nervous system is seeking. This testing mechanism operates largely below conscious awareness. She may not be thinking, "I am testing him right now," but her emotional system is actively scanning for cues. Female psychology relies heavily on somatic feedback. How her body feels during and after the interaction informs her future behavior more than logical analysis. The hug allows her body to register whether closeness with you feels safe, warm, and grounded, or tense, awkward, and unpredictable. Another layer of the test involves emotional leadership. Women are drawn to men who can hold emotional space without needing direction. When she hugs you first, she momentarily steps into a vulnerable position. How you respond tells her whether you can remain stable when she lowers her guard. Emotional stability is one of the strongest predictors of attraction in female psychology, yet it is rarely demonstrated through words. It is demonstrated through presence. The hug also tests attunement. Does your response match her energy, or do you impose your own? Matching energy shows empathy and awareness. Overpowering her energy shows self-focus. Pulling away from it shows emotional avoidance. Female psychology values attunement because it signals relational intelligence. The hug is a low-risk way for her to measure this without verbal negotiation. Many men fail this test not because they lack confidence, but because they misunderstand the purpose of the test itself. They assume the hug is a reward rather than an invitation to remain composed. This misunderstanding causes men to either grasp for more or retreat to safety. Both responses remove the sense of flow that women rely on to build attraction gradually. Touch as a test also allows women to preserve plausible deniability. If the interaction does not feel right, she can retreat without confrontation. If it feels good, she can increase closeness later. This flexibility is crucial in female psychology because it minimizes emotional risk. Men who respond with calm consistency make it easier for her to move forward because they do not force her into decisions before she is ready. It is important to understand that women often feel attraction before they fully trust it. The hug sits in that gap. It allows attraction to express itself gently while trust catches up. Men who interpret the hug as a confession collapse that gap prematurely. Men who understand it as a test allow the process to unfold naturally. The men who succeed in these moments do not try to pass the test. They do not perform, impress, or control. They simply remain themselves, steady and present. Female psychology responds to authenticity far more than strategy. When a woman senses that your emotional state is not dependent on her approval, she feels freer to explore her own feelings. Touch, in this context, is not about closeness alone. It is about calibration. She is adjusting the emotional distance and watching how the system responds. Your response becomes part of her internal data, shaping whether future touch feels inviting or unsafe, whether emotional intimacy feels possible or constrained, and whether the door she briefly opened feels worth opening again. When a woman hugs you first, the psychological weight of the moment does not end with the physical contact. In many ways, it begins there. Female psychology places far more importance on how a man responds than on the action she initiated. The hug opens a brief emotional window, and what you do in that window determines whether it closes gently, stays open, or shuts completely. Most men assume attraction is created by bold action or verbal confidence, but attraction is often preserved by emotional regulation. When she hugs you first, she is observing whether your internal state remains stable. She is not looking for excitement or intensity in that moment. She is looking for grounded presence. The ability to stay calm when closeness increases signals emotional maturity and self-assurance, two traits deeply tied to female attraction. A composed response communicates that you are comfortable with intimacy without being controlled by it. This is critical because female psychology is constantly scanning for signs of emotional dependency. If your behavior changes immediately after the hug, if your voice softens too much, your attention becomes too focused, or your energy spikes noticeably, it signals that your emotional balance has shifted. That shift tells her that she now holds power over your emotional state, which creates pressure rather than desire. On the other hand, responding with emotional coldness or distance sends a different but equally damaging message. It suggests that intimacy makes you uncomfortable or that you are emotionally unavailable. Female psychology interprets this as a lack of relational safety. Even confident women hesitate to invest emotionally in men who appear detached after moments of closeness, because it creates uncertainty about future emotional availability. The optimal response is subtle reciprocity. You acknowledge the moment without magnifying it. You remain warm without becoming eager. You stay present without pushing forward. This balance reassures her nervous system that closeness with you does not come with emotional consequences she must manage. When a woman feels she does not have to regulate your emotions, she relaxes into her own. Your physical response also matters. Tension, stiffness, or hesitation can communicate discomfort, while excessive gripping or lingering can feel intrusive. Female psychology is highly sensitive to bodily cues. Your body language should reflect ease, not effort. Ease suggests experience and confidence. Effort suggests insecurity or overinvestment. What happens immediately after the hug often carries more meaning than the hug itself. Continuing the conversation naturally, maintaining the same tone and pacing, and allowing the interaction to flow without interruption, tells her that intimacy fits smoothly into your life. This normalizes closeness rather than elevating it into something dramatic. Women are drawn to men for whom connection feels safe and natural, not rare or overwhelming. Another overlooked element is emotional leadership. Emotional leadership does not mean control or dominance. It means steadiness. When she initiates the hug, she momentarily steps into uncertainty. Your calm response guides the emotional tone back to stability. This creates a sense of containment, which female psychology associates with trust. A man who can contain emotion without suppressing it becomes a secure emotional anchor. Your response also influences how she categorizes you internally. Women continuously update their mental models of men based on behavior. If you respond well, you move from being emotionally interesting to emotionally reliable. Reliability does not kill attraction, it deepens it. Many men fear that staying calm will make them seem uninterested, but female psychology distinguishes between indifference and composure. Composure signals strength. It is also important to recognize that your response sets the precedent for future interactions. If the first time she initiates touch results in emotional turbulence, she will hesitate to initiate again. If it results in ease and warmth, She feels encouraged to deepen connection gradually. Women prefer progression that feels earned and safe, not rushed or forced. The response is not about strategy or technique. It is about self-possession. Men who are secure in themselves do not need the hug to mean anything specific. They allow it to be what it is. That non-attachment is what makes attachment possible. Female psychology responds to men who do not grasp at moments, but allow moments to pass naturally. Ultimately, the hug is an invitation to show who you are under intimacy. Not who you want to be, not who you think she wants, but who you actually are when emotional proximity increases. That authenticity, paired with calm confidence, communicates more than words ever could, and quietly determines whether the connection evolves, plateaus, or fades entirely.